welcome screenwriters and welcome everybody else. Hey, I got my screenwriters here to come talk to the screenwriters. So back in December, I had the pleasure of seeing this movie, and I got to see it with the Q&A with Bennett Miller, Steve Carell, and Channing Tatum. But the problem was it was missing the voice of the writers. It was a great Q&A, but I wanted to hear from the writers who had to make what is really a truth stranger than fiction kind of project come to life.
What do you hope to achieve, Mark?
I want to be the best in the world.
Good.
Coach has great power on an athlete's life.
Mark.
Emax Frye, who's an WGA Award, Edgar Award winner for his first screenplay, Something Wild, directed by Jonathan Demme. Was also a writer on Band of Brothers, where he received a Christopher Award, a Peabody Award, and was nominated for an Emmy. And Dan Futterman was nominated for a 2005 Academy Award, a BAFTA, as well as Writers Guild of America Award for his screenplay Capote. He also won an Independent Spirit Award and shared the USC Scripter Award with Capote biographer Gerald Clark. Dan and his wife, who is his frequent writing partner, were showrunners for the third season of the HBO series In Treatment. Last season, he also, along with his wife, produced and wrote the series Grace Point for Fox Television. And he's been an actor appearing on Broadway in Angels in America, off-Broadway at the Lincoln Center and Manhattan Theater Club. His film acting credits include A Mighty Heart, The Birdcage, Urbana, and the upcoming Kill the Messenger. And our moderator tonight is producer Tova Leiter. Tova's credits include Glory with Denzel Washington, Oliver Stone's Nixon, Evita with Antonio Banderas and Madonna, and Varsity Blues. So please join me in welcoming Dan Futterman and Emax Frye and Tova Leiter.
So these guys look normal, right? How did you get involved in this weird little tale that is, in fact, compelling and interesting and remarkable?
My agent called me.
That is such a lie. You called him.
No. No, he actually one time called me, and this was it, because he also represented Bennett Miller. And Bennett had read a script of mine that he liked and was looking for a writer on the project. And so I sat down with Bennett, we talked about it. I'm a sports guy, ex-jock kind of a guy, and this was kind of a sports movie, so it was kind of interesting to talk about it. Little did I know where it was going to go. And that was it. It was just a casual conversation at first, just because I got a phone call from my agent.
I read some kind of another tale about somehow you meeting with Bennett at a DVD signing of Capote.
No, that was Tom Heller, who's an executive producer who gave Bennett a package of material that intrigued Bennett when he finally looked at it, and he became obsessed with the story. And he did probably 6 or 9 months worth of research before I met him, and he had a huge trove of material that's what we began with.
So are you saying that we can actually go to a director when he signs DVD and talk to him about our project?
Easy, yeah.
You see, you learned one thing tonight that is you can't learn anywhere else. He just told you. All right, so you started up, and then how did Mr. Futterman came into the equation?
Well, Mr. Futterman, I've known Bennett for a long time. So I went to junior high school and high school with Bennett. And so when we worked on Capote together, and Bennett had actually he told me when he got this stack of material from Tom Heller that this was intriguing to him, and he talked about it a little bit, and I didn't get it. And I don't know that Bennett totally got it. And his work with Max's work for Bennett was incredibly important in collapsing what was a 10 or 12 year period into 18 to 24 months and making an actual story out of it and figuring out the character interactions that weren't completely obvious from hearing the true story. And so I got interested in the project once I read Max's script, and Max had other obligations he had to go off and do, and Bennett asked me if I would become involved.
First of all, you are witnessing two writers on a project that are actually getting along and complementing each other. I have yet to see that. This is the first time. So you are witnessing to this thing. So that's another nice, very thing to learn in the future.
This was this was an easy one because Max's work was great, but just as a professional tip, you never know what's going to happen with the project if you're rewriting somebody. I mean, I've been rewritten. Max has done both things. Don't take people's names off the script because they did important work on it, and it'll all get sorted out later, hopefully in a nice way. And we both feel like I don't know what's giving feedback here, but that each of our contributions were important ones, but that's not always the case. It'll get worked out, but don't take those names
I
off.
feel like world peace is possible once I'm sitting and seeing. But let me ask you something else, because you were talking about that he was able to take something sprawling and actually condensing it into a script, which is always a challenge. It is said, and it's been my experience sometimes also, that actors who, when they write, are very good with character and dialogue, but plot is a little more difficult. So do you think that that's true, and do you think that's what worked with it? No?
I'm very good with...
Really?
I'm not a very good actor, but I'm very good with plot. I don't know. It did happen on this project that Max did a lot. I mean, in addition to writing some, it got to a point where I sort of started to forget what Max had written, what I had written.
Wow.
It didn't really matter to me, but there was one piece that actually never did end up in the movie that was my favorite scene that I always kept in the script that Max wrote. But he did a lot of the structural work. It was so unwieldy that a lot of that work that I was doing was kind of stripping stuff away and streamlining, because it still remained, I'm sure you felt like it still remained.
So first of all, what was your favorite scene that didn't end up in the movie?
There's a good, you want to talk about that scene? I mean,
I don't even remember what it was. So.
Max, what a great scene. I actually there's not a lot of room for stuff in the movie, but I kind of wish it was still there. Dave arrives, and you see him, he arrives finally at Foxcatcher, and you see him with a couple other wrestlers hunting, and he kills a deer. And then they're having a cookout, and the deer's on a big spit, and he skinned it and dressed it, and DuPont is watching Dave. He tells a very funny story, and the other wrestlers are clearly drawn to him, and you get the sense immediately that DuPont has made a terrible mistake.
That's an important scene. Why is it out?
I just don't think I don't actually know if they shot it, but I thought it was an important scene too. It was a good scene.
Really?
And it was a funny.
Because otherwise you have so many questions and we get into it, And when you say you didn't get it, what's not to get? It's such an interesting story, and it's based on a true story, and it's complex.
Well,
why didn't Bennett get it, and why didn't you?
Look, essentially the story boils down to DuPont builds this facility. It wants Dave at first. He gets Mark instead, and then Mark leaves. And then Dave's there for a long time, and then he kills Dave. That's the true story. And they felt like disconnected events. Max made them connected.
Magic.
So at the beginning, he really wanted Dave, and he got Mark instead.
Yeah, that was one of the revelations, right, that comes out.
I don't think that's so clear in the movie.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
it is
know.
true that
It's not clear in the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, but in real life, I think
It's clear
that
in the
was
script.
That was yes, clear in the script. So that Mark finds out at some point that DuPont had asked Dave before he'd asked Mark, and Mark had always played second fiddle, which you see clearly in the beginning of the movie now, when he's mistaken for his brother, and a few other kinds of hints that Dave is more the alpha than Mark, and Mark is kind of a tag along, even though he's won a gold medal himself. But that was a nice turn in the script, that Mark finds out that
the script
had invited Dave first.
But here it's not in the movie.
I just don't think it made it in. I mean, look, when Bennett had the assembly of the movie, it was over 4 hours long.
I see.
And it was, and as he said, it was actually pretty watchable at 4 hours plus. And so getting it down to 2, whatever it is now, 2:10.
Yeah.
Something
You
like
have
that.
to lose
I think
all kinds of
it was a struggle, and for him, I mean, if he spoke here, I'm sure you heard about it. A very, very attenuated struggle.
I'm going to open up for the student to ask, but before that, I really want to ask, why did he kill Dave?
You want to answer that?
What do you think?
Well, I'll answer what I always answer, and that is this, that there's no record of why DuPont killed Dave. There was no confession, there's no written statement, there's no interview, there's no court documents where he said, I did it because, which allowed us as the storytellers to a little bit more leeway. And if he'd said, I did it because of this, then we would have been kind of hammered into making that make sense. Whereas the way it was, nobody knows why. And so we were able to fabricate our own reasons based on true events and based on the personalities that we squeezed out of the real people and made them into movie people. And we're able to create a narrative that excuse me, eventually made sense for the movie. Why DuPont really did it? Ask him.
Okay, let's open up for students. Please line up.
So amazing movie, really, really great. My question is, what's something that Bennett Miller did, positively or negatively, took from your script and either changed or construed or did it differently than you intended?
Can you give us a minute?
Sure.
I'm just totally kidding.
Well, they're still so angry about it, they can't even talk.
Yeah. No,
Not at all. No, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah.
Joking.
Yeah. Go ahead. That's the.
Here's a good example of a completely positive thing, and it's kind of, to me, distills what the essence of good filmmaking is. There's a scene at the beginning, and you probably remember, where you first see Mark and Dave wrestle, right? And it starts with Dave's in his office with the guys from USA Olympics, Olympic Committee. And Mark walks in, and he's come from, giving this speech for $20 or whatever he gets paid. And he's fairly miserable and sees that Dave's getting attention from these people. And this is all scripted. The guys come out, hey, Mark, how you doing? It's all scripted. Mark's not interested in talking to them. They walk away. What's written in the script at that point is that they start to, something about like they start to circle each other, and you start to get a sense of their differences in physique, and Dave is the alpha, even though he's a lighter weight class, blah, blah, blah. They start to wrestle, back on script now. Mark hits him in the nose, and Dave starts to bleed, and then Dave punishes him for that. And what Bennett created the room for, and that Greg Fraser shot so beautifully, is this moment where the actors improvise this kind of gentle, warming each other up. And Dave is sort of gentling Mark like he's a wild animal, saying, how you doing? What's up, buddy? And stretching each other out. And it's beautifully, it comes from their training, together as wrestlers. It comes from Mark Ruffalo's experience as a wrestler. He was a high school wrestler. And Bennett created the space for that. And that to me is really, that's when everything is working. And the script is working to set that space up for the actors to do their work, and Bennett gives them the room to do it. So that's something that comes to mind when you ask that.
Cool, thank you.
Hello. My question to you two is, what inspires you to write a movie such as Foxcatcher?
A job?
Yeah, we did it for the money. No, not in this case. He acts like he's never done it for the money.
I would love to.
Yeah, I know, me too. I was hoping you'd done it. For me, like it was as I said when I first kind of encountered it and talked to Ben about it, it was a sports story, but it wasn't Hoosiers, and it wasn't The Blind Side, and it wasn't a typical sports story. It was you start with a gold medal in the national anthem, and then you deconstruct the lives of everybody involved, and basically 3 people have their lives destroyed over the course of the movie, which I found to be pretty interesting. And there's I think, and Dan can deny this, but for me at this point, it's always got to be about something, whether it's a drama or more comedic or whatever. It's got to be about something, and this movie was definitely about something, and it was a really hard journey to get to what it was about, but it was incredibly rewarding to get there. Once we got there, it wasn't an action movie or anything that was simple, and I think that I found that challenging. That was really interesting. And
I think that's good. That's well said.
I thought it was very Shakespearean in a way.
Very what?
Shakespearean.
Thank you.
That whole interplay, the whole interplay between the characters. What?
The rhyming.
The sonnets.
The wrestling. No, I did. I
think that it's, insofar as there are certain Shakespeare tragedies, I think of it a little bit more like Greek tragedies. The Capote has an element of that as well, that you see at the beginning the seeds of the destruction of the characters. They can't but end up where they're going to end up. So, I agree with that.
Okay. I'll take Greeks. Right?
Yeah.
Greekly. Yeah. Okay.
I really wanted to know, with adapting this work, was there something like, because I'm sure you had plenty of work with these 3 characters, was there something you couldn't add to the film when adapting them just specifically as people because you know that it's not right for the screen?
Happy ending?
I asked because I see, like, especially in terms of Mark Schultz, Channing Tatum's character, like a lot of the private moments that he had, like, throughout the entirety of the film. I was wondering if that was just you. Was that you, like, coming out with he just needs to be alone, like him smashing his head against the mirror, or just him celebrating in the bathroom? Was that something that you just saw when adapting the work, or is that something you just felt needed to be into the film?
Well, and this goes for every movie that you do, I guess, that is based on true characters. There are real people and there are movie people, and they're not the same thing. So, because your job is to dramatize stories and people's emotions, you have obligation to somehow convey that in a more powerful way than might have taken place for real people. For example, I don't know that Mark Schultz actually smashed his head with a mirror, but that definitely came across very powerfully, right? And so that's kind of what your job is to take those things that you know about these people in real life. And we had lots of material. We had an unpublished 60-page manuscript that Mark had written that really was in his voice. not very well structured, covered a lot of his childhood and college, which we don't cover in the movie, but it really gave insight into him as a character and the way he talked and the way he thought. And I use
anger too.
And anger, the way he had that. So that kind of thing you can really take and elevate into a character and take the essence of a person and make them into a movie person, which is what you got to do when you make movies, unless you're doing a documentary.
Yeah, we had, besides that, I talked to Mark several times, and he was, he's a guy who's very, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he remains very hurt and angry about this period of time. He's an emotional guy. And what was really apparent to me was how raw and open that wound is for him. The space in him that Dave used to occupy is still empty, and you get that very strongly from him. And so part of this was an effort to capture that, to distill that somehow, to set particularly in the first act, to set that relationship up that's going to get destroyed.
That's it. Thank you.
Hi there. My question was actually concerning a very specific scene where John was sitting in the room with his mother, and sort of as she was talking to him, she was talking about his train set. Now, I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I used to actually work at the Indianapolis Children's Museum. And I was curious because actually in the lower basement level, we have a giant train set that I would actually, one of our jobs if we're working in that section is to turn it on every day. And I was really curious as to whether or not that was the train set that she was referring to. And
yeah.
That
was it.
That was it. Okay. And like what? I suppose like what else? I mean, how big did the DuPont? God, that's the phrases. What other organizations did the DuPont family give to? Like it seems like they had their hand in quite a few cookie jars.
Yeah, I mean, I think most importantly, for the purposes of the movie, there's it is kind of almost too perfect that they first made their fortune in gunpowder, selling gunpowder to the American government. Not for the Revolutionary War, though, for the War of 1812. And so that's a lie about the Revolutionary War. They were not established in America at that time doing that business. But that's just sort of like a private knowledge that's a complete myth. But and the fact that and then you see DuPont carrying, in his own twisted way, thinking he's carrying that mantle.
It was another war against the British, though. So
exactly. But in terms of charity and stuff, I don't know. I wasn't. I'm sure they give to a ton of stuff, and he built the wrestling facility at Villanova, and he was buying a lot of access and favors, and it would spend whatever it took to have people want to hear him give a speech.
Thank you.
Hey guys, how you doing? First off, a huge congratulations to you guys for your Academy Award nomination. Very well deserved. My name is Rishi. I did the MFA filmmaking program here. As a writer, I tend to find myself very meticulous and very kind of self-critical when it comes to every word on the page. A lot of the advice that I've received is that the art is in the rewrite, and to just kind of spit out the words first and then go back and shape and form. What are your guys' philosophies on the rewrite, and how meticulous are you guys when it comes to writing?
You want to go first? Okay. My pattern is I don't outline. I don't do any kind of long format bullet points or anything like that. My thing is I always work from character, and I start going, and I write a first draft on a legal pad with a felt pen, and many times I can't even read what I wrote. But I do that as fast as I can, and just because I don't, I'll throw pages away, I'll cross stuff off. It's a lot faster than the computer, and once I have what I consider to be a pretty close first draft, with plenty of holes and gaps in it, I sit down and put it on the computer, and then I'm really focused on what it looks like. But to get to your point about your concern, what it looks like on the page, I recommend that to everybody. It's very, very important, because especially when you're starting off, you got one shot that impressed somebody with the screenplay, and nobody goes back and reads the screenplay a second time. So what's on the page is your first, your calling card, really, and it is important, because you're going to start at the bottom of the food chain. You got to get past all those bored, PAs and other people, assistants, who don't want to read their screenplay and are looking at, Facebook while they're doing it. So you got to have something on the page that impresses them.
You read a lot of screenplays?
Not as many as I should.
You should,
yes,
yeah. I mean, I find that incredibly much more helpful than watching a film in order to get a sense of what's been written and how to structure different genres of movies or TV. But I write very differently from Max. I mean, I outline everything, sometimes both in sort of bullet point or cards on the board, and then like a paragraph for every scene before I start writing it. And then I also, every day when I start writing, I often go back to the beginning and go up through and then write the next however many pages I'm able to get out. So I find that helpful. I'm rewriting as I'm writing, but other people I know very successfully do what Max does, and Max does it very successfully. Just get it out and then work on it. I'm not able to do that. But the best stuff I've done, I think, has taken a long time. And I mean, this is one of them. Because you get a chance to put it away and come back to it after a period of time, and you see it completely differently. The things you thought were working or not working, the things you had kind of forgotten about are actually interesting. So that time is important, but you don't always get that time. You start getting work and you get 10 weeks to produce a draft. It's a system that works against good writing often.
No, we used to say, deliver the script and the date, and then it's like, you sit on it for about a month.
Right.
Yeah. But you can never rewrite too much.
Thank you. Good luck.
I am a filmmaking student, actually, but I do write my own stuff. And I wanted to ask you, one of the things that really, really drags me into this movie is the way the characters are constructed from, especially from a physical point of view. You were mentioning this earlier, but all these characters really do look like animals in sort of ways. When they fight with each other, when the two brothers fight, for instance, you can see them smelling each other and touching each other in a very animalistic way. And I don't know, like looking at Ruffalo's character, I would guess that he prepared by watching gorilla documentaries for a year or something. He really does move like a monkey. So I wanted to ask you, were these qualities already in the characters while you were developing them, or did that come slowly while making the movie and while directing?
You can go and watch Dave Schultz wrestle and Mark wrestle. I mean, there's that great moment where Mark wins the Worlds and he does a backflip. Channing does a backflip, and it's actually Channing doing the backflip remarkably. But Mark does that. Mark was a gymnast before he was a wrestler. Dave was a really kind of an oddball wrestler, and just he did move like that. This was a weird one because we're working with the person is going to direct the movie, and who's going to work with the actors, and has been looking at all the material we looked at, and the actors are going to see all that material. And so, some of it's in the script, the knowledge was that whoever's playing it is going to have access to that and going to be guided by Bennett. And so it didn't need to be as spelled out because it wasn't going to some mysterious director or unnamed actor. I mean, unnamed actors, yes, but a mysterious director. We knew what. Yeah, so that was easy to have a little more of a shorthand with. Is that?
Yeah. We didn't need to write in lots of character details because we had real people that they were going to base their characterizations on. So we didn't need to do that. Like we didn't describe the singlets that they were wearing. So it was a little bit unusual for screenwriting.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
What scene you didn't write?
What's that?
The singlets, the wrestling outfits.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question kind of goes along with that. So when you're writing on the page the character descriptions, how does it vary between if you're writing historically based characters or completely making up fictional ones of your own?
I think not at all, but you want to?
Here's my advice. And I see that I teach a writing class at NYU, which I've done for 25 years. So I read a lot of.
So he's right.
So yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I find that students or people that are starting off, they tend to do what they've been told, which is when you write a character, intro a character, you need to write a description about that person. And sometimes that works, especially if you can make it in one line. But a lot of times people get bogged down with focusing on things like the color socks somebody's wearing. And I always say this, if I don't need to know it, then don't tell me. So if you're writing a character that's 7 feet tall, and that's going to come into play later on, that the character needs to be really big or tall, then write that. If it doesn't, then don't write it. I mean, I have people, they turn scripts in and they'll describe a waitress who brings somebody toast and gives them an age and what they're wearing. And it's like, wow, it just bogs me down as a reader.
Yeah.
So brevity is important, I think, in characters. But it's, like I said, Foxcatcher was a different thing, was a different animal, because it's based off real people, and we knew that the actors were going to have access to all that. So I don't think there was hardly any.
No, there's sort of little stuff about. I think about the differences between Mark and Dave that was in the script. I don't believe there was any description of John DuPont because he just. You can watch that documentary, and see him trotting around the room. So it's not necessary. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
He's one of the oldest characters.
Hi, my name is Luna. Thanks for coming. As a screenwriter, sometimes it's really difficult to find a very interesting story. So I would like to ask you, as a screenwriter, how do you find a new interesting story? Because there are many sport history that's really interesting too.
I see movie stories every day in the news, in TV. I spend a lot of time on the internet, and probably way too much time on the internet. Just going on. For example, today there was a story about some kid having a 3D printed hand. Did anybody see that? Yeah. Okay, that's a movie. You can make him a superhero with a 3D printed hand, or the hand takes over. I mean, there's a ton of stuff you can do with that stuff, right? So that's just, it's never, for the most part, it's not like you find the story. There'll be a character that you could use, for me anyway, like a kid with a 3D printed hand who, can fly or whatever they can do with a hand. I don't know. But I mean, I don't write that kind of stuff. But that would be something that I'll bet anything. Like 15 development people saw that story today and took note of it. And now they're going to go to whoever runs their department and they're going to say, there's a story, I got this great story about a kid with a 3D printed hand. And somebody goes, oh, that's great, man.
But I think I have my father-in-law is a novelist, and I was talking to him. He's been working on something for a long time, a novel, but he considers himself sometimes in writing mode and sometimes in reading mode, and I think sometimes the reading is directed reading, like research, but there's sometimes, I do this a lot too, where you're just trying to, fill it back up. I just finished a script that had a lot of different influences, from news stuff I was reading to a couple books about hunting. That and you hear stuff on the radio and This American Life. It's a matter of absorbing stuff and just recognizing, there's something interesting in there. It's something interesting either as a story or as a character that you could put in a story. I don't have a million ideas. Some writers do. They have a list of 15 things they'd like to write. I don't have that. But I feel like it's not very long before I have something I'm intrigued by.
So do you have any personal pattern when you see a story and get an inspiration to write on it?
I like writing scripts either for TV or film because they have a structure. I could never write a novel because I like knowing I'm on page 90, I better wrap it up. And if I go over 120, I better cut it back. So I like that, and I like knowing by a certain page you're about done with that first act. You've had all the time to set things up that you're going to have. And so there's a pattern to all these stories. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're asking, but there's a pattern to them by the rules of filmmaking, which I think are fairly good ones. And there are not too many movies that break those patterns very successfully. The Wachowski brothers, or now brother and sister, have been doing that really unsuccessfully lately, I think. And it's like, there's a way to tell a story, I think. Maybe I'm a little conservative in that way, but that's a pattern that I keep coming back to, that I find really comforting.
But I will say I agree with that. That there's something fantastic in the structure and the rules, because you know where you are. It's like basketball. Probably don't play, but if you know what you're doing, and you know the game, you can do all kinds of things within that game. You don't need to run out of bounds or do something else. You can play a pretty interesting game within the rules. That said, given what's happened to TV in the last 5 years with binge watching and that kind of stuff, my question now is always: is this a movie, or is this a closed-end series, or is this a series? So if the story is really bigger than a movie, then I'm looking at, it's possible that this is TV, like, what's the thing that just won all the awards?
True Detective.
True Detective, that was 8 episodes, right? Okay, so that's kind of what I base it on now. I'm not strictly a TV or movie guy or anything else. Sometimes I think something falls into one category, and sometimes I think it falls into something else. It just needs to be, if you're gonna create for TV, you have to create a universe, and if you're doing a movie, you got to do a world. Movies are actually kind of more contained than television, obviously.
Well, you're also of a generation that, this is not our generation, but people are telling 5-minute stories now, and very successfully. So you just have to figure what's the right size for this.
Hey guys, I was curious about the character Mark. I was just wondering if you were conscious of his intelligence level when you were writing him, because for the first 5 minutes he didn't speak, and the way he interacted, he was kind of like a Neanderthal person. But I don't think he was stupid, and I was just wondering if there was a template you worked off for that character, and what the process was for writing that character.
Let me go first, because Dan followed me in that process. So after the movie screened in New York, and my wife saw it, she said, "Well, what did you write in there, and what did Dan write?" And I said, you know, honestly, I can't remember. So she said, well, can I read your draft, the draft that you turned in? And I said,
so she read it and then she said, why does Dan have credit?
Yeah. I said, okay, yeah, sure. So she read it, and you know, there were things in there that that she saw had been, Dan did a lot of moving around and splitting up and doing all kinds of other things. The thing that most impressed her, though, was she said, wow, there's a lot more dialogue in yours. And I glanced at a couple of pages and I went, oh man, I have big paragraphs, Mark speaking big paragraphs, and eloquent, and I realized that over the course of Dan working on that he brought it way down, and I think the actors and then Bennett in the editing process brought it even further down. So if you were to read, like say the final shooting script, there was a lot less dialogue from Mark than what I had, but even less in the movie, because you know, you see those actors do something, or you see Mark, Channing Tatum's interpretation of Mark. He didn't need a lot of words to get across what in the beginning in your head you're thinking, oh, he needs to say this here, but he doesn't. He just can make a gesture or a look. I think that's part of the filmmaking process. Add your 2 cents there.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. There, in terms of his intelligence level or not, I don't think that was, as you said, that's not the issue so much. I think for at least from my perspective, the issue was that there's an innocence about him that's going to get corrupted and ruined, and the you can project that onto somebody who's not. You know, who's not Mark. The real Mark Schultz is much more chatty, and once you get him going, he doesn't stop. He's got a lot to say. This Mark Schultz is not that, and it felt more childlike and innocent and pure in this going towards in this direction.
Right. I think. We tried to portray him as lacking sophistication, and part of that came off as being nonverbal and not particularly articulate, and had nothing really to do with his intelligence. I mean, they're both really smart guys. They were, and you know, you get to that level of wrestling, it's pretty sophisticated. You got to deal with a lot of people, and it's not like junior high school. You know, it's a pretty sophisticated level of athletic accomplishment.
Because
he attended university, right?
Sure, oh, yeah. And did very well. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Angelina. I'm in the MFA screenwriting. First, I'd like to thank you so very much for being here. It is our honor to have you here. My question to you is, as screenwriters, what was your greatest struggle as a screenwriter, and how did you get past it?
In this project, or
as
in
a
life?
screenwriter in general?
Oh, in general, so not on there.
Yeah, the greatest struggle that you faced.
Yeah, it's tough.
Sitting here with Dan, I think.
It's almost over.
No, for me, I think, and this addresses everybody. I went to film school, went to NYU, and you know, I dropped out of college because I didn't know what I was doing, and decided when I was 27 to go back to college. And I was required to take a writing course, Introduction to Dramatic Writing. And holy God, I discovered that I somehow had an aptitude for it. So once I discovered that, then that's all I focused on. I was not interested in directing or sound, or you know, I just was like zeroed on that. So I think that really for me, the biggest obstacle, and maybe this is not a big obstacle, was to have the confidence in myself to actually go to Los Angeles and really give it a shot and try it. And the turning point for me came when I was an intern at a movie of the week company, and I went in and they said, well, you know, we're going to have you read some scripts. And they put me in this little room and gave me a pile of scripts, and it had CAA cover and William Morris, and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be great. And I opened them up and started to read, and they were garbage. They were terrible. And I went, man, I can write that bad. So yeah, the day that I took my last final, I got on a plane and flew to LA. And then I got very lucky because I had an agent in 3 months and a movie in production within a year. And then I could leave LA and move back to New York. Here I am.
I think I got very lucky as a screenwriter as well. I had been acting for a long time and thinking about a movie I wanted to write for a long time. And it was a many year process. I finally wrote the script for Capote, and my wife was. My now wife was instrumental in that. She had been a writer and was helpful in that process, figuring out how to tell the story. But for me, the hard thing is letting things go. You write stuff that you love or you come to love, and at a certain point you get to the end of the road, you realize it's not going to get made, and yet you still try. Still trying with this thing that I wrote with Anya for years ago, and we just know that it's good, and not that many other people know that. So it's hard to let things go and put it away, work on something else, gear up for somebody else's idea, and know that you've got this thing that's still burning a hole in your drawer. Anyway, for me, that's the hardest thing.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. My name is Chris. And I just wanted to know, being hired on to write this great movie, is it easier or more difficult to write an adaptation than your own original material?
No, I've done everything. I've done adaptations off of other movies, foreign films, books, articles, and I have done my own stuff. I will say this, that when you do your own stuff, you don't usually, if you're doing it on spec, which I hope you guys all do, that you only have to answer to yourself. You are hired on a project to do an adaptation, book adaptation from another movie, a sequel. You are beholden to whatever those people are paying you for. So. That can be good and it can be not so good. But when you write on spec, excuse me, you're your own boss, and there's nothing better than that, I find.
Yeah, for this one, we were both writing a script through many discussions with Bennett, countless hours of talking through every scene. What should we keep, what should we not, what's another idea, we're all both writing a script for Bennett to direct. And that's both comforting and as well as really painstaking, because he's a terrific director, a really terrific director. He's got a lot of great ideas for story. He's not a writer, doesn't do the writing. And so he has an idea of what he wants, but you have to then do your thing and give it to him. And do you like it? Do you not? What don't you like about it? And so it's a very, very particular process to work for a director, and particularly as meticulous as Bennett is. This was 6 years, and the writing process was 6 years on and off, from Max through me. So it took a lot. Did a lot of. My file for this is insane. I'm sure yours is as well. I don't know, your legal pad stack is very big. Anyway, it's a different process than even getting hired by a studio to do an adaptation of something where you're doing a couple drafts and you're handing them in and they give you general notes, but not like this.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cricket Rumley. I'm one of the screenwriting instructors here. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge. And I have about 10 questions, but I'm going to limit it to one. the scene in which John offers Mark cocaine in the helicopter is so shocking to me. And the downward spiral, Mark's downward spiral is so shocking and told in a fascinating way. But I have so many questions around that. Like, what were you working with that you know happened? There are implications that there was serious emotional abuse and sexual abuse and rich person taking advantage of poor person abuse. And I'm just curious, was there more scripted? Was there a lot stripped away in the cut? I'm just very curious about this downward spiral. It's fascinating.
Okay, I'll address that. When I worked on the script, two of the big things that Ben and I talked about were, one was the drug use. We had, anecdotal knowledge that there was cocaine use, but we didn't have, that had not, when I was working on it, had ever been corroborated by anybody, specifically like Mark. And so when that helicopter scene, when I first took a crack at that, there was no drug use in there. It was the other excuse me, components, other elements were in there. They were going to DC, and Mark was going to have to present DuPont as this coach and mentor. That kind of stuff was all there, but there was no drug use in there. I think that came in with Dan. And the other
thing, honestly, this is what I mean. Like, that's news to me. I don't remember that not being in there.
I wrote in the drug use, actually, rethinking it. No, that wasn't, because we made a specific point that we weren't going to introduce cocaine because we didn't have confirming evidence that it did. And subsequent to that, Mark, I think, did say to Bennett, yes, I did do cocaine. The other thing was the homoerotic stuff. I worked, when I was doing this draft, I worked closely with a guy who ended up being the executive producer and the writing technician consultant on the film, John Jura, who lived on the farm for 6 years and was a good friend of Dave, and when Dave was shot. And I said once to him about DuPont would come in the middle of a session where they were working on it, and he would just pick somebody and wrestle. And kind of creepy, right? It's like Joe Biden or something. Anyway, so I only saw a picture of Joe Biden today with his hands on somebody. That's why I said that. Anyway, so I said to John, listen, did you wrestle DuPont? He said, yeah, if you want to wrestle, I wrestled him. And I said, did you ever get any, like, sexual vibe off him or weird thing? And he goes, no, I never did. I said, well, so what was it like? He said, we just faked it because he wasn't a wrestler. So we just kind of pretended that we were doing moves, but he wasn't an athlete. I mean, he was in his late 50s at that point and wasn't a wrestler. So again, we chose not to address that particular issue about homoeroticism. And listen, if you're not a wrestler and you look at two men in singlets, there's lots of eroticism there if you want to look at it that way. It's not something that men in this country do. And so just the fact that they were wrestlers brings some of that to the table. And so we decided that we were just not going to, because there was no evidence of it, nobody ever came out and said, yes, he molested me or anything like that we were just going to let it sit there and you looked at it the way you wanted to look at it. I think Dan followed in those footsteps. The drug use in that helicopter came out of subsequent conversation.
Later conversation with Mark. Yeah, there was sort of Mark slowly opened up more and more about it, and it was clear there was a ton of blow around on that. It was the 80s and the early 90s, and DuPont wasn't had substance abuse problems, and so yes, he finally said yes, I did I did do that. So that situation is interesting. There's a world-class guy. Wrestling is such an ascetic life. What brings you to that point where you start doing that? That kind of it's a sort of self-abuse in a way, and the notion of this guy who's been just scraping together his incredibly meager existence, even though he won a gold medal, finally being put in this beautiful property in this house, access to helicopter and the seduction of that, and the corruption of that innocence was the stuff that was interesting, and that felt like a good moment to have it happen.
Right. I mean, that was really what the essence of Mark's character was. He starts off in this kind of pure form, talking to unappreciative kids about the beauty of wrestling and dedication and hard work and all that. And over the course of the movie, you watch how that is corroded and corrupted by his interaction with DuPont and drugs and those other things. And that was really kind of the arc, I guess, of Mark's character.
And Mark also, I felt that he wanted love so much, that paternal love, that pat in the head, that, all of that kind of stuff. And he wanted to please him so much that every little slap or every little thing, he took it 100 times worse than Dave would, who was much more central.
They both, that's what Mark and DuPont had in common so powerfully, was this desire to be loved and respected.
Yeah.
And they eventually both turned to Dave for that, and they couldn't both have it from Dave.
Yeah.
And so that, you talk about a Shakespearean or Greek tragedy, it can't end well.
Yeah.
It's beautifully done. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I want to tell you that the DVD Blu-ray is coming out soon, so we can support them and recommend it on your social media and rent it and buy it and recommend it. That would be very much appreciated. And as for the Oscars, the only thing I can say is wear comfortable shoes. No, we really wish you a terrific evening and success and your dreams come true. And thank you so much for coming and sharing it with us.
My dream is for Wes Anderson to win. I think that's